Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. We're going to do an unboxing today of a new RPG product, and it is relatively new anyway. It is Forbidden Lands. It's from a company called Free League, which is a European development group. It's an any winner, if that means anything to you. To me, I know what it is, but it doesn't mean anything. This is a box set, fairly handsome box set. It's a little bit smaller than one might expect from like your standard RPG box. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's a bit smaller than, say, the Curse of Strahd hardcover here. But it's a very interesting looking product because what we have here is a game. It's basically an assembled package with a system and a setting that is explicitly designed for hex crawls, which I'll talk about more as the video goes on, and it's a specific type of RPG campaign that I really like. So let's see what we get here. So it's in this sort of, not digest size, but a little bit smaller than typical box, and I would say that's about 2.5 inches deep, something like that. The box itself, the cover art on the box is very nice. It's got a little bit of like a satin finish type of thing. The box itself is a little farty. Not particularly atypical RPG box material. It's not super sturdy, but it shouldn't have to be. So we got a whole pile of stuff in the box. So let's take a look at it. There's some interesting influences here, including what are called legacy board games, and I'll get to that as well. So we have two hardcover books, one of which is a Game Master's Guide. That's this one, and it looks like we have the fancy ribbon in here too, and the other is the Player's Handbook. They're both hardcovers inside the box. Oh, that's nice. They both contain this map, which we'll get to that because there's more here, and they're small enough to fit in the box. They do have very nice end papers. They both have the fancy ribbon in them. Also, we get this book of Legends and Adventures. So what the legends are is basically plot seeds that you can generate more or less randomly from the game system using these tables. The adventures, what do we have for adventures in here? There's not really adventures in here per se. What we have is more like an adventure generator in here. We also get a fold-out map, poster map. It's going to be hard to see this, but there are hexes on this map, and then as your campaign proceeds across these lands that you are hex crawling in, you can put these stickers on the map to reflect things that you have found, which is kind of where we get the legacy thing from. This is actually double-sided, but I believe it's the same map on each side, so you can do it more than once, and I think you can buy extra stickers. There are special cards which you don't really need that you can buy for this game, and there are special dice which you don't really need that you can buy for this game as well, plus a screen and some adventure books and stuff like that. So there's quite a bit available for it. But looking through the Player's Handbook, I would call this a relatively modern design, because I've already looked through these rules, okay? I'd call it a relatively modern design, but one specifically tailored to hex crawling, in that you have a whole section of the rules which is just based on traveling and how that works mechanically and stuff. So you have a number of kins, and there's a section here nominally. You can do this in a different setting too if you don't like this setting, and it's a pretty high fantasy setting. It's intended to have kind of a sword and sorcery feel. You're explicitly not heroes. You are adventurers. You are out to get what you can from the world. The traditional, role-playing game thing. Here we have a 12-point summary of character creation. The kins available are humans, elves, half-elves, dwarves, halflings, wolfkin, orcs, and goblins. And there are professions as well. Professions including druid, fighter, hunter, minstrel, peddler, which is an interesting choice, rider, rogue, sorcerer. So the art in here, the map art is really nice. The cover art on the box is really nice. A lot of the art inside the books is very old school, to the point that if you look for dates on some of these things, you'll see dates in the 80s. The data on this one here is 85, for example. I don't know if that's accurate or not. It definitely looks like the kind of thing we would have seen in the mid 80s, though. We have a basic skills system, which has a dozen or so skills, I think. 16. And here's the whole list. I kind of like to see an exhaustive skills list, but on the other hand, I kind of don't mind if there's a tight skill list either. And this skill list looks like it handles a lot that you would need to do. There is a little thing on the custom dice here. So you need D6s of a couple of different colors, and you need a D8, a D10, and a D12 to play. And it's a basic dice pool system. Sixes are successes, so you're trying to roll sixes. And you get the ability to explicitly, as a player, you get to narrate the action yourself, which some people like. I have mixed feelings about it. I find that it makes a game dependent on everybody being on the same page, but if everybody's on the same page, then it can work really, really well. But this is definitely intended for campaigns. Now, there's artifact dice. That's what the D10, D8, and D12 appear to be for. So that's interesting. Here we have the descriptions of the various skills, and you can see that unlike the last skill section we flipped through with Chivalry and Sorcery 5th edition, these skill descriptions are relatively short. The paper is kind of like a cream-colored, matte finish, nice feeling paper. Presentation-wise, everything looks pretty good. I've looked at this. I haven't really absorbed all the mechanics, so if I'm failing to go into a great deal of mechanical detail, please mention it in the comments, and I can do another video on that once I have absorbed this a little bit better. There are talents, which appear to be like individual ability chains that you can learn for each of the professions. Looks like here's some general ones that anybody can learn. Are these still... Yep, looks like they are. Here's our combat chapter. I have seen the combat system in this described as relatively detailed. I can tell you that there's sort of an action impulse type mechanic where there are fast actions and slow actions, and in each initiative, I'm not sure that's the right term, you can take either 2 fast actions or 1 slow action. These are the combat cards if you buy the deck, but you don't really need to use these, in my opinion. The initiative cards you do kind of want cards for, but you can just use playing cards for those numbered 1 through 10. That's not a big deal. There's a social conflict mechanics, which in a game that has an emphasis on like stronghold building and stuff, and we'll get to that too. That's in this game as well. Then I do kind of want that, regardless of whether you end up using it for player characters or not. So we do have a pretty fat, now I mean these aren't full-size pages and it's not particularly small print, but we're looking page 83 clear through to 115. So you got about 32 pages of combat rules, but that does include the rules for injury and healing and conditions and social conflicts and all the weapons and armor lists and all that kind of stuff. So so it's a lot of pages, but not. I don't think it looks particularly complicated to me. You have a whole section on magic. Now, this is a bit of a magic low system. Magic costs you willpower, I believe. You have, several dozen spells that you can do in different like arenas, like shapeshifting or healing, or there's some general spells too. Awareness. And I believe which areas you have access to depends on your vocation or profession. Now here's the journey section. This is actually what I think. The basic mechanics, right, I've given you a vague idea of what they're like, but this is where the game actually, I think, gets interesting, because you have this whole chapter with 20 plus pages or so, about journeys and travel. So you have, the day is divided into quarters, and then each quarter day becomes like an overland impulse that things can happen in. Like there could be an encounter, you might have to set watches, you can take various actions such as hike, lead the way as you're leading the hike, you can keep watch, you can forage or hunt or fish or make camp or rest or sleep. You may also explore, so you might be able to find something that's hidden. There's a little section on sea travel, and then at some point, you can either build yourself or take over an existing site and turn it into a stronghold. And strongholds can have people in them, they can have resources in them, they can have, I believe, what are called functions in them, which are things like a blacksmith's forge or a granary or things like that. A lot of these are given for you in the rules, although, here's a list of functions, for example. Although I would be inclined to be very generous in allowing characters to come up with their own functions and actions and stuff. These all get their own descriptions. Here's different hirelings like bakers and miners and jailers and guards and their salaries. It does look, as far as I can tell so far, like you're tracking money and resources. Definitely tracking resources, because there's stuff on the character sheet for that, or the stronghold sheet. Here's a section on gear. You're definitely going to be doing adventuring here too, though. It's not just a game about running this stronghold. I mean, it's not Civ, but there's going to be. Looks like we're still into equipment and stuff. Raw materials. That's cool. Since you're going to need that, right? If you need 20 stone to build your fire hearth or something like that, then you're going to might need to buy that. Maybe there's no source of good stone near you, and it actually shows what equipment you need to make it too, which is actually quite neat. Here's some critical injury tables. I don't remember seeing this before. These are D6. You do D66 rolls too, meaning you roll 2d6 of different colors. One color represents 10s and the other represents 1s. D66 is something that's been used for a long time. I've most recently encountered it in the latest edition of Traveler, which uses it quite a bit. Here's the character sheet. You can download the character sheets for free off their website, of course. I believe Modifius is the distributor of this. They're connected to it in some way. The character sheet's very handsome, gives you a lot of little pips to keep track of willpower. There's actually a game mechanic thing that gives you willpower, and you track experience as well. You don't have levels or anything. There are 4 attributes: strength, agility, wits, and empathy. Here's your page 2 of the character sheet. Here is your stronghold sheet, where you can have lists of your functions and hirelings and your stockpile of these various materials. And then there's an index, which is always good to see. It's good that there's an index. What I would have liked to see is a combined index containing the index materials from both the players and the Game Master's Guide. Now, I warn you now that some of the material that you might see in the Game Master's Guide might construe as spoilers here, because there's 3 adventure sites provided: the Hollows, which is a village, Weatherstone, and the Vale of the Dead. So in here we have a whole bunch more detail on the setting. It's a quite loose setting, but there are supplements for this that give you more detail on it. It gives you some general Game Master advice. It gives you a whole section on running events at the Stronghold, which there's quite a few of. But again, I would feel obliged even to create a much more elaborate suite of events for this. We go into the history of the setting, and there's basically the area on the map was like partitioned away from the rest of the world for a long time by some evil wizard, and something called the Blood Mist penetrated the land and killed anybody who wandered very far from their home village. That Blood Mist has now gone away, although the evil wizard still has minions floating around. And people can wander around again, and that is the spark for the basis of the campaign. And we have a whole big history here, which is fairly detailed, actually, which I think you want in this kind of thing. I mean, if you're finding a ruin, well, when is the ruin from? That's actually kind of built into the system here, which is kind of cool. Here's the calendar, that's the calendar, actually. It's just months and or seasons. Here's a list of gods, and this is the thing that I'm not crazy about. Here's the protector god. So there is a protector god. There's also a god called Worm, a god called Raven. That's not where it gets bad. There's a god called Rust and Heem. There's a god called Huge, a god called Clay, and a god called Whale, Flow, the Nightwalker, and Horn. This will not be my favorite pantheon of fantasy deities, I can tell you that right now. There's obviously ways to fix that if it's something that you really object to. Or like it says in the front of the player's handbook, you can run this system in your own setting if you want. Here's much more information and detail on various kin, including a map telling you where all the little sub-kins of the various kins that are available live, which is nice. Still in that, different clans of dwarves. There are ogres here. There are orcs. Ogres seem like, from a cursory glance, they seem like large buffoons rather than evil semi-giants, which is fine. The Saurians, who are these reptile guys. The Whiners, who look a little bit like some of the old, I think it was Ralparth the Troglodytes, actually. Halflings and goblins, who are apparently somehow related. And then here's a bestiary. It's not as exhaustive as maybe you would want. But again, there's plenty of room here to develop your own stuff. Death Knights, which double as liches, basically Death Knights that can cast spells are called liches. Here's dragons, drake worms, ents, ghosts, giants, giant squids, gray bears, griffins, harpies, hydras. So there's a fair amount of monsters in here, including basically all the classics and some mildly novel critters. Here's undead, which you obviously would want. Wyverns. Looks like here in the back we have just a table of various animals, which is good to have. Now here are artifacts. These are like things with story behind them, and they are fairly potent, but they also have drawbacks. So the Asina blade, for example, here, it's got a weapon bonus, good weapon damage, and a D10 artifact die. Wounds from it become infected. This counts as a disease. Against demons, it inflicts additional damage. So quite powerful item, but it also inflicts 1 point of damage just from contacting your skin. And it has a will of its own. So there's a whole bunch of these, and I don't want to go through them all, so I'm kind of flipping through pages in big chunks here. And here are encounters. Now, there's a random encounter table, but these aren't just like, hey, you encounter some goblins. These are actually like little story seed type encounters, and there's a table here based on the terrain type of which one you might end up with. And there's 43 of them total, and then we get into a whole section on how to create adventure sites, which actually is a whole kind of random dungeon generator thing. That's pretty cool. I like that. Here's a section on creatures and NPCs with generic stats for them. Always handy to have that kind of thing. We're still in that. What are we in here? Is this treasure? Yeah, so here's a bunch of treasure generation tables. One of these days I'll do a video on this. The best random treasure generation system that I've ever seen is actually the one out of an old game called Powers and Perils from Avalon Hill. Not the home of that you associate with great RPGs, and it's in fact a game that has a lot of, I could say a lot of negative things about it, but it did have some neat stuff in it too, including a really good random treasure generator. The Hollows is a village. There are villages, castles, and I think or dungeons, and we get one of each in here. The Vale of the Dead is a dungeon, which makes Wrath Storm or whatever it's called the castle. We have once again two fairly nice, and they've got this is kind of like that pseudo leatherette type of thing going on. These are pretty nice books. The whole box runs about $50. I have to say, based on the production quality that I see here, I think that's not an unjustified price. Although, I would say that if they are going to have special cards and special dice that are recommended for use with the game, and again, they're not mandatory, so this isn't a critical problem or anything, that those probably ought to be in the box too. The dice set costs something like $30, and I think the card set costs something like $30 too. So they're relatively expensive, but the dice set comes with like 15 or 20 dice too, so it's not a small dice set. This is an extremely promising looking game. If anybody has any specific questions about it, I would be delighted to do a follow-up video for Forbidden Lands, so please mention it in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, and please check out the Patreon. Till next time, happy gaming.